Let's get to your calls. Raymond is with me this morning. Raymond, how are you?
This is Steve Hawkins.
Well, I'm off to a pretty good start.
Anyone who's spent any time in Bristol probably recognizes Steve. He was the anchor for the evening news at WCYB for several years. Now he has his own radio show in the mornings at Super Talk WFHG Radio. We thought Steve would be a great subject for Bristol bios.
Grew up in Rogersville on the Holston River. It was great. I mean, I lived in the country, a couple of miles out of town, and I think you could even argue, in a town of 2,800 people, you're still living in the country if you're from a really small town. But it was great. I wouldn't change anything about my childhood. A lot of my friends from childhood are still my friends. I think that's one of the great things about growing up in a small town is you're able to build those relationships, and everybody. We knew everybody in every house in the neighborhood, and go to church on Sunday, you knew if somebody wasn't there. There are 100 people, but still, you'd know if somebody wasn't there because you knew everybody that well.
Even though his family history goes back further than the state of Tennessee, it's only a coincidence that Hawkins County bears his family name.
Yeah, interestingly, my great-great-great-grandfather was the schoolmaster at the Amy Fort before Tennessee became a state. But the Hawkins, the county is named after, was from Georgia. Benjamin Hawkins, who was a senator who worked out an agreement with the Indians, and they named Hawkins County after him.
Like a lot of young people, Steve knew that he would need to attend college. He just wasn't sure about what he would need to study.
Graduated high school in '73, went to ETSU, kind of general studies until I took a television production class, and it changed my life. It was all new information every day, and it was like nothing that I had experienced before, and I knew that this, broadcasting is it. Growing up, I had been interested in radio, listened to the big market stations at night, and had a desire to, be a big-time rock and roll disc jockey. But a couple of my friends worked at the local radio station. There were no other jobs, so I didn't have the opportunity in Rogersville. But I did when I got to ETSU, and radio was great. And so the plan was to work in radio until I got too old for radio and moved to television, and it worked out the other way around. So I worked in television for 35 years and then moved to radio.
Steve is one of those rare people who spend a big part of their life at their very first job.
I worked full-time my last year and a half of school, yeah. I was just in the right place at the right time. Tom Headley, who was my advisor, told me about a nightside reporter opening at WCYB, and he said, "You should apply." I don't even have all the classes yet, Tom. I'm new in this. And he was like, I think you need to apply for this. I can help you, with shooting and the things that you would need to do, but this is an opportunity you need to apply for. And I got the job. My first week there, the sports guy announced he was leaving and going to Knoxville, so 2 weeks later I'm doing sports at 6 and 11, and did that for 3 years, then moved to the late news and started producing, became news director. When Merrill retired, took over the 6 o'clock news, and it was that's how it happened. Job changed before I actually started doing my job almost. I covered a few council meetings and that kind of thing, and then the sports opportunity happened, and so yeah, I was on air at 6 and 11, covering an occasional meeting, but more often than not, picking up a sports story in the afternoon and going and covering something in the evening.
Over 35 years, Steve saw television and the technology of television change dramatically.
The first cameras that I used were silent film. So you'd take a 100-foot reel of film, which is about 3 minutes, and go shoot a council meeting, and you were just shooting video. There was no sound that went with it. We had a couple of sound cameras, but they weighed like 100 pounds, and it took 2 trips to the car. We later got a CP16, which was a great film camera with easy to use sound. And so we had a film processor. You'd shoot it, bring it back. It would take about an hour to process and 20 minutes to cut. and then it went on the air. It was radically different from being able to go out and put up a microwave mast and do a live shot. We had gone from film to 3/4-inch videotape to beta size tapes, and then into just shooting on a disc. So radical change from film to digital, yes.
There's an old rule in the television industry that nobody stays at a job very long. Again, Steve was the exception.
I was one of the crazies. You know, my friends who were news directors were generally at a station for 1.5 to 2 years. But every time while I was there that something came along, they had something else. I started out doing sports, and I started getting some offers from other markets to do sports, and then Bob Smith Jr. came and said, hey, you should move to the 11 o'clock news. Oh, I was ready for that. And then I started thinking about, you know, maybe moving somewhere else as a news anchor, and the opportunity to produce came along, to produce Merrill's show at 6. And, you know, Merrill's just one of the greatest human beings ever. So, you know, being able to work with him at 6 and then anchor at 11 was great. And then Bob was promoted to general manager, and I had a chance, instead of moving somewhere else as a producer, I had a chance to be the news director. And then, you know, when Merrill retired, what an honor to replace Merrill Moore at 6 o'clock. So it just worked out that there was always something. And then this was home. You know, Tracy's from here, my family not far away. Parents were getting older, and our daughter then in school and working along. And so it gives you incentive to stay where you are if the work's good and you're enjoying what you're doing.
Almost every major change in Steve Hawkins' life happened while working at Channel 5, including meeting his wife, Tracy.
She was working during the summer before going back to UT in the fall, and we just hit it off. We came from similar backgrounds. Our families were a lot alike, and we just kind of hit it off. And she ended up going into another business because as the relationship became more serious, we realized that, you know, working together is not going to be a good thing, and so she went into banking and then eventually got into the insurance business that she's in now. But we would not be together had it not been for our meeting at the television station, I don't think.
And then a very few years ago, it was time for a change. He started teaching at ETSU, but soon another opportunity came up.
It was only about 6 weeks, not long after I left the television station. Lisa Hale, the owner of Bristol Broadcasting, contacted me and said she had an idea that she would like to talk about, and she wanted to have a local morning talk program. And I was intrigued by that. I sort of put everything else on the back burner that I had been looking at and started thinking about, you know, what the possibilities were of doing morning talk radio. I was just intrigued by what that could be, and that's how I ended up in radio.
Now, you would think that television and radio are a lot alike.
In terms of dealing with the persons that are listening or watching, there's a huge difference in radio and television. I've been off the air for 3 years from the television station, and I still have people that walk up to me and say, hey, I watch you every night. The people who listen to the show and talk to me are very specific. I liked the conversation you had about this, or I think you should talk about this sometime, or my point of view on that is this. It's very, very specific versus being almost generic in television, and I love that interaction with people. I think that's my favorite part, is what the listener brings. These folks are very well read. They understand the issues, and they have a particular point of view that they want to bring, but generally they're willing to listen to other points of view, and it's a great conversation. But that ability to talk directly with someone and not broadcast to them is just great.
So Steve Hawkins is once again achieving substantial success in another arm of the broadcasting world. Maybe this is why.
I'm pitched frequently would you be willing to talk to us about this, or can you help us with that? And I try to do as much of that as I can, because I think that's why we're here. You know, it's a public license that we're taking care of for a period of time, and then someone else is going to take care of it. And while it's our responsibility, we should be doing what we can for the place that we call home. I just think that's part of the responsibility of a broadcaster.
Be sure to catch Steve's morning talk show on Super Talk WFHG.